The cameras flashed, the red carpet rolled out, and Tyler Perry stood in front of the grand opening of his multi-million-dollar studio, a symbol of triumph, of breaking every barrier. But what the world didn't see was the child who once hid under his bed, praying for the shouting to stop. The boy who bled from his father's fists, who wrote in secret to survive the noise. At 16, he made a decision that defined his life. He changed his name, not for fame, but to escape the man who gave it to him. And years later, when the world finally knew his name, he would still whisper prayers for the woman who gave him her soul, his mother. This is not just the story of an empire builder. It's a story of scars, of silence, and of a love that anchored him through storms. Today, we uncover the painful roots behind the empire, the untold story of Tyler Perry's parents, and the losses that shaped a legend.
Born as Emmitt Perry Jr. on September 13, 1969, in the heart of New Orleans, Tyler Perry came into a world that didn't feel safe. His childhood home was a small house filled with shouting, beatings, and fear, where a child learned early on that silence was safer than truth, and pain was part of growing up. But even in the darkest corners, light finds a way through. His mother, Maxine, tried to protect him as best she could, a preschool teacher by day and a quiet force of resilience by night. She gave Tyler the one tool that would become his salvation: faith. She took him to church, introduced him to gospel music, and taught him the value of storytelling, not just to entertain, but to heal. As he grew, Perry struggled with depression and the emotional toll of his father's abuse. He never graduated college. He didn't rise through the traditional Hollywood ranks. Instead, he began writing plays inspired by the journal entries he started as a teenager, a private escape from a violent home. In his early 20s, he saved up $12,000 to stage his first play in Atlanta. It failed miserably. Hardly anyone showed up. He slept in his car, showered in public restrooms, and questioned whether the pain of his past would always define his future. But he didn't stop. For 7 long years, he kept writing, kept producing, and finally, one night, the seats were full. People were laughing, crying, and seeing themselves in the stories. The character Madea, a gun-toting, no-nonsense grandmother, became a symbol of healing and strength. What many didn't know was that Madea was a living tribute to his own mother. From there, the rise was meteoric. Tyler Perry became one of the most powerful figures in American entertainment, writing, directing, producing, and even owning his own studio, the first Black-owned studio of its kind in the U.S. His journey wasn't one of luck, but one of grit, grief, and the long echo of a mother's voice. Through every sitcom, film, or play, his past was never far behind. But beneath the empire lies a foundation not just on talent, but on trauma, and the people who defined both ends of that spectrum. A mother who loved him unconditionally, and a father who left wounds that never fully healed. Because no matter how high Tyler Perry soared, he carried 2 ghosts with him.
Before Tyler Perry ever sold out a theater or directed a box office hit, he was a little boy sitting at his mother's feet, watching her fold laundry in their tiny New Orleans home. Her name was Willie Maxine Perry, or just Maxine, and though the world may never fully know her story, her fingerprints are on every single word her son has ever written. She worked as a preschool teacher, earning little but giving everything. Every morning she walked to work, her shoes sometimes worn thin, her shoulders heavy with the burden of holding a broken family together. At night, after feeding her children, she would hum old gospel songs while preparing for the next day. Her voice, soft, cracked, full of soul, became the lullaby that calmed Tyler's spirit after yet another terrifying encounter with his father. Maxine wasn't just a mother, she was the wall between Tyler and destruction. When his father's rage exploded into fists, it was she who stood between them, arms trembling but firm, shielding her son with her body and her prayers. She never had the power to stop the violence completely, but she gave Tyler the one thing that mattered, the belief that he was worth saving. It was she who bought him his first notebook. "Write it down," she told him, "so it doesn't stay inside you." That notebook became his first script. Maxine had a way of comforting without many words. She would stroke Tyler's head gently when he curled up beside her, whispering scriptures like bandages over wounds. She told stories of her own mother, of growing up poor, of keeping faith even when the world didn't offer much hope. Tyler later said her wisdom was simple but deep. She didn't have to shout to be heard. Madea, as loud and wild as she is, carries my mother's spirit. One story Tyler often told was of a night he came home crying. His father had beaten him again. Maxine didn't cry. She sat him down, pulled out her Bible, and read the 23rd Psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd," she began. He still remembers how her voice trembled on the line, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." Her strength wasn't flashy. It was quiet, consistent, enduring. She endured poverty, heartbreak, and a husband who broke more things than he ever built. But she never let that bitterness reach her children. In the years of Perry's early career, she came to his plays when she could. She'd sit in the back, not making a fuss, laughing with tears in her eyes when the character Madea delivered a line that sounded exactly like her. He once asked her, "Do you recognize yourself?" She smiled, leaned in, and said, "Only the good parts." But time is cruel, even to the strongest women. In the late 2000s, Maxine fell ill. The diagnosis was never made fully public, but Perry spoke often of her failing health. He paused filming, turned down offers, and spent weeks by her bedside. "I just wanted to be her son again," he later said. Not the man everyone knew, just her boy. As her strength faded, he held her hand and read to her from the same Bible she once held open. In the final weeks, she stopped speaking much, but every time he came into the room, she smiled. That smile, soft, knowing, full of history, stayed with him long after her voice was gone. Maxine Perry died in December 2009, but her presence never left. Tyler has said he still talks to her, still hears her guidance when he writes. "She gave me life," he said, "and when she left, she took a part of mine with her."
Tyler Perry doesn't speak his father's name often. When he does, it's with a tone that's both distant and heavy, like lifting a stone from a wound that never truly closed. Emmitt Perry Sr. was, by all accounts, a man hardened by his own past, but the pain he carried became a legacy of violence, passed down to his son in ways that would take decades to unravel. Tyler once described his childhood as a war zone. The abuse wasn't rare, it was routine. His father, a construction worker by trade, believed in discipline through fear, control through fists. There were no explanations, no apologies, just rage and silence after. In interviews, Perry shared chilling memories. "There were times I prayed for God to take me, not because I didn't want to live, but because I didn't want to live there. The beatings were severe, sometimes
Tyler would bleed. Other times, he would escape into closets, hide under beds, write in secret. His pen, the only safe space he knew. But perhaps the deepest scar wasn't physical. It was the emotional fracture. The feeling of never being loved, of being tolerated, barely. He said, "My father never hugged me, never said he was proud. I was just there." At age 16, Tyler made a decision that changed everything. He legally changed his name from Emmitt Perry Jr. to Tyler Perry. It wasn't about fame. It was a declaration of separation, a way to cut the chain, to end the cycle. "I didn't want to carry his name anymore. That name hurt too much," he once confessed. And yet, the story didn't end in hate. As much as he tried to disconnect, there was a lingering thread. A man trying to understand another man who had broken him. Years later, in an unexpected turn, Perry took his father in when he became elderly and ill. He provided care, support, housing, but never called it reconciliation. He said, "It wasn't forgiveness, it was release. I didn't want to carry the bitterness anymore." There was a moment, decades after the abuse, when Perry confronted his father, not with anger, but with a simple question. Why? The answer, vague and emotionless, was, "That's how my father did it to me." The cycle. The generational trauma. Tyler Perry didn't just break it, he exposed it. He turned the pain into plays, into characters, into a public platform that spoke for countless people who had never named their own wounds. And still, the boy in him never fully healed. He once wrote, "I'm not sure I'll ever know what it's like to be fathered with love." Emmitt Perry Sr. didn't die in a car crash or from a sudden illness, but in Tyler's life, his presence faded long before either of them grew old. The death that mattered was emotional, and sometimes that kind of loss leaves the deepest silence.
The year was 2009. Tyler Perry was at the peak of his career. Films in theaters, TV shows on prime time, and the name Madea becoming a household phenomenon. But behind the scenes, his world was unraveling. His mother, Maxine Perry, had fallen seriously ill. The diagnosis was never widely shared, but the toll on her body was visible. She had grown weaker with each passing month, her energy flickering like a candle nearing its end. Perry, despite his intense work schedule, put everything on hold. He canceled meetings, paused productions, and spent every possible moment at her bedside. In her final days, the hospital room became a sacred space. He read scriptures aloud, played soft gospel music on a small speaker, and told stories she had once told him as a child. When her eyes opened, they were tired, but full of knowing. When they closed, he sat in silence, holding her hand, afraid to let go. On a cold December morning, she slipped away. No dramatic final words, just a deep breath, and then stillness. Tyler Perry didn't announce her passing publicly right away. There was no press release, no headline, just grief, quiet and immense. The funeral was held in Louisiana, far from the cameras and headlines of Hollywood. It was small, just family, a few close friends, and a handful of people who had known Maxine beyond the title of Tyler Perry's mother. The room was filled with soft organ music and the scent of white lilies. She lay in a simple casket, dressed not in anything grand, but in the same Sunday dress she had worn to church the year Tyler's first play finally found success. He chose it himself. It made her feel beautiful, he said. Perry did not speak at the funeral. He sat in the front row, shoulders shaking quietly, a single tissue in hand. On the casket, among the wreaths, was a card written in his own handwriting.
Madea's soul is yours, Mama. Thank you for lending her to me. A few celebrities sent flowers, but the day was never about fame. It was about a son saying goodbye to the only person who had ever made him feel safe. When it came time for the final prayer, the pastor paused, looked at Tyler, and simply said, "You were her greatest joy." Outside, the sky was gray. Rain fell gently, not a storm, but a soft drizzle, as if the heavens themselves understood that someone extraordinary had left the world. As the casket was lowered into the ground, Tyler stepped forward, alone. He bent down, touched the wood with trembling fingers, and whispered something only he and his mother would ever know. Then he stood, straightened his coat, and walked away slowly. Not as a celebrity, not as a mogul, just as a son burying his mother.
After the funeral, Tyler Perry disappeared from the public eye. No interviews, no red carpets, no social media updates. For 6 months, the man who had built an entertainment empire went silent, as if the loss of his mother had pulled the curtain down on everything. He later described that period as the loneliest chapter of his life. "I didn't know how to exist without calling her every morning," he confessed. "She was my compass. Without her, I felt untethered." For a time, Perry avoided the studio. The stage that had once felt like home now felt hollow. Even the character of Madea, the loud, fearless, gun-wielding grandmother, felt too painful to write for. "Madea was my way of keeping her alive," he said. "But after she passed, I wasn't sure if I could still hear her voice." And then, one morning, he sat down and started to write again. Not a blockbuster, not a pilot, but a letter to his mother. That letter became the heart of his next project, Madea's Big Happy Family, a film wrapped in humor but rooted in grief. Through each character, Perry poured out his sorrow, his memories, his longing. It was no longer just storytelling, it was a form of resurrection. Audiences laughed, some cried, but few realized that every joke, every line was part of Perry's mourning. In the quiet moments of that film, he wasn't writing to entertain. He was trying to say goodbye. In interviews after the release, he often mentioned small signs. A gospel song playing in a store, a line from a sermon she once loved. "Sometimes," he said, "I feel her hand on my shoulder, like she's still guiding me through." But grief never leaves. It just changes shape. And in Perry's case, it became purpose. He began supporting more women-led charities, funded shelters for single mothers, donated to causes his mom had cared about in silence. "She gave everything," he said once, "without ever asking for anything back. Now it's my turn to give, in her name." Maxine Perry's body may have been buried in 2009, but her spirit lives on in every story, every speech, every laugh Tyler Perry gives the world. He carries her not in pain, but in purpose.
Every spotlight has its shadow, and for Tyler Perry, behind every standing ovation, every box office hit, every powerful monologue, stands the silent presence of a mother who once held his hand through the darkest nights. His story isn't just about fame. It's about surviving pain and choosing not to let it define you. It's about breaking cycles, rewriting legacies, and finding peace not in forgetting, but in remembering. He once said, "People think I'm strong because I survived my father, but I'm strong because my mother loved me." In a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, Perry's journey reminds us that sometimes the quietest love leaves the loudest echo. So the next time you see a Madea joke or watch one of his films, remember, it's not just entertainment.
It's a tribute, a memorial, a son's way of keeping a promise. Have you ever lost someone who shaped your soul? Do you still hear their voice in the quiet moments? Tell us your story in the comments below. And if you felt this, like and subscribe. Because every family has a story, and some are never told until now.